My name is Iris Calder, and I am 21 years old. At 6:18 p.m. on Friday, May 24, 22 minutes before the Wichita Technical Institute graduation ceremony began inside Hangar 4, I stood near the open doors and watched my brother touch a scholarship pin that had my name behind it. The hangar smelled like jet fuel from the maintenance bay and carnations wrapped in damp paper. Hot metal folding chairs scraped against polished concrete in short, sharp bursts, the kind of sound that made people look around for a loose bolt, even when they were dressed for a ceremony. My program bent slightly in my hand because my thumb had found the same corner 6 times. My parents had forged a scholarship decline in my name and handed my aviation pipeline seat to my brother, Nolan. Then they moved my graduation seat to the back row and told me I was lucky they invited me at all. Laurel Calder, my mother, stood beside the aisle in pearl earrings and a cream jacket, smiling like she had arranged the evening for the good of everyone in it. Dean Calder, my father, had one hand on Nolan's shoulder and the other lifted toward a donor table, waving at people who had no idea he had stolen from his own daughter in a way that looked, at first glance, like paperwork. Nolan kept touching the scholarship pin on his lapel. Once, twice, 3 times. They thought a portal click and a borrowed pin that erased 2 years of work, but Grandpa Walt had mailed one envelope before he died, and by midnight, that envelope would decide everything. Welcome to By Then I Knew, where we tell calm stories about the moment a woman stops explaining herself and lets the truth arrive with paperwork. If you like quiet justice, steady voices, and endings that settle instead of shout, subscribe and stay with us. Drop your city and what time it is below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to the first time I learned my family could watch me do the work and still hand the credit to Nolan. I was 8 years old the first time I understood that a person could be useful and still be treated like furniture. It was late June in the Calder backyard, the kind of Kansas evening when the grass stayed hot after sunset and mosquitoes gathered near your ears with the patience of creditors. Our lawnmower had not started for 3 Saturdays. Dean had pulled the cord so many times that his forearm turned a shade of red that matched the brick wall behind the garage, and Laurel kept telling him dinner was getting cold, which made him pull harder. Grandpa Walt had come over with a paper sack of peaches and a socket set wrapped in an old towel. He was 78 when he died, but he was not old that night. Not to me. That night his white hair was combed straight back, his shirt smelled faintly of machine oil, and he knelt beside the mower like he was greeting something stubborn but not hopeless. He told me to hold the flashlight. I remember the texture of the plastic handle against my palm, slick from the humidity. I remember my knees sticking to the grass. I remember the mosquitoes near my left ear and the smell of gasoline warming in the mower tank. Dean looked at Nolan, who was 10 then and already practiced at standing where praise could find him. Nolan had one hand in his pocket and the other around a melting orange popsicle. The juice ran down his wrist, but he did not move closer until Dean said he should. Let your brother see, Iris. He might actually use this someday. Dean did not snatch the flashlight from me. That would have been too clear. He just placed Nolan half a step in front of me, so my arm had to angle around my brother's shoulder to keep the beam on the mower cover. Grandpa Walt saw it. He did not sigh. He did not scold. He only tapped the cover with 2 fingers and asked what I noticed first. The pull cord snapped back 3 times before the mower caught later. But before that happened, before Dean could pretend the problem was complicated enough to belong to him, I saw the wet black stripe on my thumb. I had reached near the fuel line after Grandpa loosened the cover, and the crack left a slick mark on my skin. The smell was sharper there. Raw gas. Rubber. Hot dust. I pointed to it. Grandpa Walt nodded once, like I had done exactly what he expected. Dean frowned and leaned in. Nolan shifted away because the smell bothered him. Walt handed Dean the replacement line and let him do the repair while I held the light steady. It took 11 minutes. I counted because Dean kept clearing his throat. When the mower finally started, Laurel came onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Dean looked back and said Nolan had helped figure it out. Nolan looked at me. Not guilty. Not proud. Just relieved, maybe, that he did not have to correct anyone. I learned something that evening while the mower chewed through 3 weeks of overgrown grass. In my family, noticing was work. Being seen was inheritance. By 14, I knew the pattern well enough to predict it before it entered the room. There was an ice storm that winter, and at 6:40 p.m., the house ran on a failing generator that coughed every few minutes like it had something caught in its throat. The kitchen smelled like candle wax and cold coffee. Laurel stood in front of the freezer with her arms crossed, saying we could not afford to lose all that food. Dean kept saying the generator was temperamental, which meant he did not know what was wrong and wanted the machine blamed for it. Nolan was upstairs, headphones on, because he had a group project due and had announced that he needed quiet. I sat on the kitchen floor with the manual spread open under a flashlight. The paper had swollen slightly from damp air, and the pages rasped when I turned them. I read the starting procedure twice, then checked the choke. It was set wrong. I waited 12 seconds between attempts because the manual said flooding the engine would make the next start harder. The generator coughed 6 times, shuddered, then steadied into a low, reliable growl. When the neighbors came over 40 minutes later to warm their hands and charge a phone, Laurel told them Nolan had always been mechanical. Iris reads instructions. Nolan understands machines. She said it softly, almost fondly, like she was dividing talents at a dinner table. The kettle hissed behind her. I looked at the manual, still open on the floor where my knees had made half-moon marks in the dust, and understood that usefulness could be acknowledged only if it stayed small. At 18, the sentence got shorter. High school career night was held in the gym under lights that made every table look tired. The room smelled like floor polish and popcorn. I stood beside the trade school table with 3 brochures in my hand, their corners damp from my palm, and signed an interest card for aviation maintenance. Dean stood behind me with both hands in his jacket pockets. Laurel was across the gym asking questions about Nolan's business program. Dean saw the aviation brochure and lowered his voice, though not enough. Trade school is for kids without options. I slid the pen back into the cup. It clicked against 9 other pens. The woman at the table pretended not to hear him. I kept the brochure anyway, folded once down the center, and put it in my backpack between a math notebook and my lunch schedule. My family called practical work a consolation prize because they had never understood ambition that wore work boots. Grandpa Walt did. His detached garage sat 1 block from McConnell Air Force Base's flight path, close enough that conversation paused when certain planes passed overhead. In October 2020, the air inside that garage was warmer than the air outside because Walt kept a small heater near the workbench and never aimed it at himself. The heater ticked when the coils changed temperature. There was always the smell of pencil shavings, metal filings, coffee in a thermos, and the oil he used sparingly because he believed waste was a form of disrespect. That afternoon, I was looking at an old carburetor housing he had placed under the bench light. He did not tell me what was wrong with it. Walt never gave me answers first. He asked what I noticed, then waited long enough for my eyes to work. The stripped screw head was almost hidden by grime. I saw it because the edge caught the light wrong. I told him I would not try to force it, because the slot was already chewed and more pressure would make the next person's job worse. Walt smiled, but not loudly. His smiles were small enough that a careless person might miss them. He slid a pencil from behind his ear, pulled a manila envelope from a stack near the radio, and wrote Iris copies across the front in block letters. His handwriting always looked like it had been built, not written. Straight lines, firm corners, no wasted loops. He told me people who depend on your work are sometimes the first to deny you did it. He did not name Dean. He did not name Laurel. That was one of the things I respected about him. Walt did not need to rant to prove he saw clearly. He prepared. He labeled. He kept duplicates. He wrote dates on envelopes because memory was useful, but records were better. With Grandpa Walt, I was never the spare hand. I was not the practical daughter, the backup driver, the one who could cover a bill until Nolan got launched. He asked what I noticed first. Then he waited. That kind of attention has a temperature. It warms a room without asking anyone to admire the flame. A few weeks after I turned 16, he took me to an aviation museum outside Wichita. We left at 8, 15 inches the morning in his old truck, the heater blowing dust from the vents, his thermos rolling once against the floorboard each time he braked. The museum had polished floors and engines displayed behind ropes, and I spent 47 minutes reading one diagram because I wanted to understand why the oil path bent where it did. Other people moved through that exhibit in less than 4 minutes. Walt sat on a bench and let me read. On the drive back, he stopped at his garage, opened a drawer, and handed me a stamped manila envelope full of airplane maintenance manuals. The envelope smelled like machine oil and pencil shavings, as if it had lived on his workbench long enough to learn the place by heart. One corner was softened from being handled, and the metal clasp had left a shallow crescent mark in the paper. Keep the plain envelope. Fancy folders make people look. Plain ones make people careless. I held it with both hands, not because it was fragile, because it was not. For the next 5 years, I kept that envelope in the top of my closet behind a shoebox of old report cards and a winter scarf I never wore. Dean saw it once when I was 17 and laughed, saying envelopes would not make me pilot material. He did not know enough about the work to insult the correct profession. I did not correct him. Some mistakes are more useful when preserved. By 20, I was in the aviation maintenance program at Wichita Technical Institute, and my life had become a series of numbers I trusted more than family compliments. Torque values, shop hours, exam scores, safety intervals, inspection windows, fuel grades, clearances measured in thousandths. One November night, Ray Bell ran a timed fault exercise on a training aircraft inside the Institute shop. Ray was 58, with grease in the creases of both hands, and a habit of checking his watch before speaking, as if time deserved respect, even when people did not. He told 12 apprentices there were 3 defects in the setup and 40 minutes to find them. The shop smelled like hydraulic fluid and coffee burned down to the bottom of the pot. A compressor kicked on every 7 minutes, rattling a loose panel near the parts cage. My hands were cold enough that the metal inspection mirror felt sharp against my fingers. I found the first defect in 6 minutes, the second at 14, the third at 21. I did not stop because the assignment had said 3 defects. Ray had said there were 3, but machines do not care what a person says from habit. I checked the safety wire again because the twist angle looked too neat from the wrong direction. At 29 minutes, I found a misrouted safety wire that could have failed under vibration. At 32 minutes, I found the 5th defect, a small one, the kind people dismiss because it does not look dramatic until the part moves under stress. I wrote them all down. 5 defects. 32 minutes. Ray did not flatter me. He did not call me special. He walked to the board, wrote my score beside my name, circled it once, and said, without raising his voice, that attention looked like that. The room went quiet in the way shops do when respect arrives before anyone has decided whether to resent it. Drew Harper, who had a chipped front tooth and a habit of bringing 2 coffees when he knew I had skipped breakfast, gave me a sideways nod. Nolan never came to the shop. Dean never asked what we did there. Laurel still called it my program, with the same tone she used for a discount coupon. I did not smile until I reached the parking lot. The air outside tasted metallic from the cold, and my breath appeared in short white bursts under the lot lights. I sat in my car for 4 minutes before starting the engine. I counted. Not because I was surprised, because I knew there would be a day when someone would need more than my word. Some families clap after they take your chair. On Tuesday, May 21, at 9:12 p.m., 3 days before graduation, I was sitting on the floor of my rented room with a parts catalog open beside me and cold noodles in a chipped bowl balanced near my left knee. The room smelled faintly of soy sauce, printer toner, and the dust that collected in the vent above my desk no matter how often I wiped it. My laundry rack clicked once as the air conditioner came on. I logged into the Institute portal to confirm graduation details. The first thing I noticed was not the words, it was the status color. I had spent 2 years reading screens where a single symbol could mean pass, hold, caution, incomplete. Green was supposed to mean cleared, red meant action needed, gray meant archived. My scholarship status line was gray. Scholarship status. Declined by applicant. I set the bowl down. The spoon tapped the rim once, a small ceramic sound that felt too loud in the room. I read the line twice, then a third time. My breathing slowed before my thoughts did. That was something Ray had taught us without naming it. When a reading makes no sense, do not touch the system until you know what changed. I wrote down the timestamp. 9:12 p.m. Tuesday, May 21. I took 4 screenshots. Portal page. Scholarship status. Account history tab. graduation seating page. Then I checked my sent email, my deleted folder, my archive, and my device login history. Nothing. I did not call Dean. I did not throw the bowl. I did not text Laurel a question she would answer with 6 other questions. I sat on the floor and looked at the vent cover above my desk. 4 screws. Top left, slightly stripped. Dust gathered along the lower edge. The metal made a faint ticking sound when the air pushed through. I counted 10 breaths. On the 11th, I remembered Grandpa Walt's envelope at 9:43 p.m. I called Nia Brooks because her business card had been clipped inside Walt's old paperwork since I was 16. I had never used it. The card was cream-colored, heavier than normal, with Nia Brooks, education attorney, printed in black letters that had not faded. She did not answer the first call. I left a message that gave my full name, student ID, and the phrase scholarship status declined by applicant. I did not explain my parents. I did not say I was scared. I gave the machine what it needed to route the problem. At 10:08 p.m., my phone rang. Nia's voice was clear and low. A copy machine hummed behind her, followed by the soft slap of paper landing in a tray. I pictured her office before I ever saw it. Narrow reading glasses, organized files, lights that stayed on after other offices went dark. She asked me to read the exact portal language. I did. She asked the timestamp on my screenshots. I told her. She asked whether I had personally declined the scholarship or authorized anyone to act on my behalf. I said no. Then she paused for 2 seconds. I counted those too, she said. Walter Calder had arranged duplicate notices tied to any aviation scholarship communication involving me. The office had received a duplicate scholarship packet in April 2024, including a donor pipeline letter naming me as the intended recipient. She said Walt had also left a sealed manila envelope marked open if they call her lucky. I stood up then. Not quickly. The bowl stayed on the floor. The noodles had gone soft and cold. My hand found the edge of my desk, and I pressed my thumb against the wood until the grain printed itself faintly into my skin. Nia explained the wrong in sentences that sounded built for a record. Someone had filed a decline in my name. The institute had treated it as my choice. The scholarship office had reassigned the pipeline seat. The acceptance portal closed Friday at midnight. Graduation was Friday evening. If I did not file a corrected acceptance and fraud affidavit before midnight, the pipeline seat would transfer permanently to Nolan under the forged declination. No speeches, no pity, just records. I asked what she needed. She said identification, screenshots, device history, student records, and patience. Then she added that patience did not mean silence. It meant timing. On Wednesday night, Dean hosted a backyard dinner for relatives before graduation. I was invited because Laurel wanted one family picture before Nolan's big night. She said those words while standing in front of the refrigerator, arranging store-bought deviled eggs on a white tray as if the eggs had applied for a grant. The backyard smelled like lighter fluid, cut grass, and the sugary blue icing from a cake box on the kitchen counter. I saw the receipt when Laurel lifted a stack of napkins. Paid in full. Pickup Friday, 3 p.m. The cake was already ordered. Congratulations, Nolan Calder, aviation scholar. Blue icing propellers on the corners. Dean stood near the patio table with iced tea in a sweating glass. His sunburned forearms looked almost orange under the porch light. He tapped 2 fingers on the table before speaking, the way he always did when he believed the room had already voted in his favor. He raised the glass and said Nolan had finally put the Calder name in the air. Nolan adjusted his watch before smiling. Then he touched the small velvet box in his pocket, the scholarship pin. He did it lightly, as though checking that the future had not slipped out. Laurel corrected the angle of a serving spoon, then looked toward me. Her pearl earrings caught the porch light. She smiled hardest when relatives looked our way. Dean turned to me after the toast. His voice lowered just enough to pretend kindness. "You're still young. You can apply for something smaller next year." I looked at the condensation ring his glass had left on the patio table. It was nearly perfect, except for one break where the wood grain interrupted it. I asked what time graduation photos were. Dean smiled. He mistook an even voice for surrender. Most people in my family did. Thursday morning, I went to the institute early. The shop was not open yet, but Drew Harper waited outside the side entrance with 2 coffees and a clean copy of my tool inventory. He wore the same brown jacket he wore every day, the cuff frayed near the right wrist, and his chipped front tooth showed when he tried not to look worried. He did not ask for the whole story. He handed me the coffee and said Ray Bell told him to make sure I ate before the scholarship office meeting. The coffee tasted burnt and necessary. The paper inventory was warm from the copier. Drew had highlighted the line showing my completed shop hours because he knew I would need things in order. He offered a ride if I needed one, copies if I needed copies, and silence if I needed silence. That last part mattered most. At 8:30 a.m., I requested a portal access log from June Patel, the registrar. June was 52 and wore a red lanyard with exactly 7 keys on it. I knew the number because I had watched the keys strike each other at the counter while she listened. She could not release everything without legal paperwork, but she confirmed there had been a declination submission from a family laptop address at 7:06 a.m. on April 15. I remembered that morning because Dean had asked me to drive Laurel to a dentist appointment at 6:45. He had taken my laptop to print something, he said, because his printer was jammed and mine connected faster. Laurel had kept me in the waiting room for 74 minutes while she filled out forms she could have finished at home. I had bought coffee from a machine that tasted like scorched plastic. When we returned, my laptop was closed on the kitchen table. A machine leaves a record. So do people who think daughters will not check. I gathered bank records next. They showed 16 months of transfers to my parents, marked household help, rent gap, utilities, or Laurel's car. They showed the same months Dean and Laurel funded Nolan's unpaid internship without asking him to cover groceries. Those records did not prove the scholarship crime. Nia told me that clearly, but they told the shape of the room I had been living in. They gave weight to the motive without turning it into drama. I collected texts where Laurel reminded me to keep helping with bills until Nolan got launched. That phrase appeared 9 times across 2 years. Launched. As if he were the aircraft and I was ground equipment. At 12:31 a.m. that night, I sat on my bed and pulled Grandpa Walt's old envelope from the top of my closet. The paper smelled faintly like garage dust and machine oil, weaker than when I was 16, but still there if I held it close. The corner he had softened with his thumb was still soft. The stamped front had faded at the edges. Inside were the manuals from the museum day and Nia's card, clipped exactly where Walt had left it. Dean's old joke came back with the clarity of a bad part, laid on a clean cloth. Envelopes do not make you pilot material. I did not say anything out loud. I slid Nia's card back into the envelope and put it in my backpack. Thursday afternoon, Nia met me in a small conference room near the registrar's office. The room smelled like dry erase marker and old carpet. The table had 6 chairs, though only 3 were being used. Nia wore narrow reading glasses she pushed up with one knuckle before giving bad news. Beside her sat a blue folder and, separate from it, a sealed manila envelope I had never seen before. She did not open it. She explained that opening Walt's final sealed envelope in the presence of the registrar and donor witness would give the reveal institutional weight. She had already spoken to June Patel. She would contact Ada Strickland, the aviation donor, and Ray Bell, my instructor. She drafted the fraud affidavit in language so plain it felt almost cold. Named applicant did not submit declination. Named applicant did not authorize third-party declination. Named applicant was physically present for institute-administered safety exam at relevant timestamp. I read each line once, then again. The paper felt smooth under my fingers. Nia watched me the way Walt used to watch, not rushing the answer. She said the goal was not to humiliate anyone. The goal was to correct the record before midnight Friday. I asked what happened if Dean denied it. Nia pushed her glasses up with one knuckle. The motion was small, practiced, and not comforting. She said the institute could not certify a transfer based on a disputed declination where the named applicant was verifiably elsewhere. Then she asked whether I understood that public correction might make private denial harder for my family. I said yes. That was all. Friday afternoon at 4:18 p.m., I ironed my graduation shirt in my room. The iron smelled like hot cotton. Rain tapped once against the window, then stopped, as if it had changed its mind. My black shoes pinched at the heel because I had worn them only twice. once for a donor interview and once for Grandpa Walt's memorial service. The shirt collar would not lie flat. I pressed it 3 times. I opened the hangar map on my phone and saw my seat assignment had changed. Row K, seat 38, back section. Nolan was listed in the scholarship row near the front. For 9 seconds, I considered staying home and letting Nia file everything quietly. It would be cleaner, smaller, less air for Dean to fill. I could sign what needed signing, avoid Laurel's pearls and Nolan's borrowed pin, let the Institute correct the file without making 410 people hear my name. Then I heard Walt's voice in memory, plain as the heater ticking in his garage. Plain folders make people careless. At 5:02 p.m., Nia called. She had spoken to June Patel, Ray Bell, and Ada Strickland. All 3 would be present. The corrected acceptance was drafted. The affidavit was ready. The sealed envelope would be opened only after Dean or Laurel publicly confirmed the false version, because the story needed its own witnesses. I photographed row K, seat 38. If this story is hitting close to home, comment SEAT below. For every person who has ever been moved to the back after doing the work, I see you. Now back to the story. I drove to the graduation hangar with my backpack on the passenger seat and both hands steady on the wheel. The sky over Wichita had turned the color of unpolished steel. My phone buzzed 2 times at red lights. One message from Drew. I'm inside, 3rd row left. One from Nia. Side aisle, donor table. I parked at 6:11 p.m. I sat in the car until 6:16. I counted the seconds between 2 planes passing overhead. 28 seconds, then 31. My shoes pinched when I stepped out, and I let them. Pain can be useful when it stays small and specific. At 6:18 p.m., I stepped into Hangar 4 and saw 410 chairs before I saw my parents. Then I saw Nolan's scholarship pin before I saw his face. Hangar 4 smelled like jet fuel, carnations, and floor wax. The metal chairs scraped against polished concrete. A microphone squealed once, then settled. Programs fluttered in the air conditioning with a dry paper sound. Blue and white graduation banners hung from the rafters, moving slightly each time the hangar doors opened. There were 410 people in the room. Not a crowd so large faces disappeared. Enough people to remember. Enough people to hear. Dean stood near the donor table with one hand on Nolan's shoulder, laughing too loudly. His square jaw moved in hard angles, and his sunburned forearms were exposed below rolled-up sleeves. He looked comfortable, which meant he believed the evening belonged to him. Laurel adjusted Nolan's collar and smoothed the lapel near the scholarship pin. When she saw me, her eyes went first to my shoes, then to my empty lapel, then to row K. Nolan looked polished in a navy suit. Restless, too. He adjusted his watch at 6:19, then again at 6:20. The scholarship pin sat on his left lapel, small and bright under the hangar lights. He touched it with 2 fingers, while Dean spoke to Ada Strickland. Ada was 64, with a silver scarf pin shaped like a propeller. She never interrupted. She wrote things down. Even from 20 feet away, I could see her pen moving in short lines across a small notebook. Ray Bell stood near the front row, hands folded in front of him, grease still dark in the creases, even though he had scrubbed for the ceremony. He checked his watch before looking up. June Patel stood near the registrar table, her red lanyard resting against a navy dress, 7 keys still clustered at the ring. Marlene Price, the graduation coordinator, moved down the aisle with a clipboard hugged to her chest, blinking fast at anyone who looked confused. Marlene reached me before my parents did. She checked her list, then looked toward row K. Her mouth tightened. She smelled faintly of peppermint gum and copier toner. She told me my seat was this way. I asked why my assigned seat had changed. I did not raise my voice. I held the program by its slick edge and watched Marlene's fingers press into the clipboard hard enough to whiten at the nails. Before she could answer, Laurel stepped in. Her perfume came first, floral and sharp, then the pearls, then the smile. You're lucky we invited you, Iris. Tonight is about your brother. There it was. 5 words inside a longer sentence. That was all it took. Ray Bell turned his head but did not move yet. Ada Strickland stopped writing mid-sentence. June Patel's hand tightened around her red lanyard. Drew Harper, 3 rows away, set his program flat on his knee. One chair leg dragged behind me. I felt the program's slick edge between my fingers. The paper had a thin ridge where it had been folded. I could smell carnations dampening in their paper near the stage. The microphone stand clicked once as someone adjusted its height. The room expected anger, tears, a retreat, maybe a daughter making herself smaller, because that was what the evening required. I gave none of those. I counted 3 breaths because in maintenance, touching the wrong thing too quickly can make a bad part look like your fault. 1. Dean's hand tightened on Nolan's shoulder. 2. Laurel's smile held too long. 3. I turned to Marlene Price and asked whether the scholarship witness group was already assembled. Dean's face changed first. Not much. A muscle near his jaw moved before the rest of him caught up. Laurel laughed once, too brightly, and said we could discuss my feelings later. I looked at Nolan. He had stopped touching the pin. I'm not here to take Nolan's night. I'm here to correct my name before midnight. Pause here. What do you think is inside Grandpa Walt's envelope? Drop your guess in the comments. A. The real scholarship notice. B. A letter to Dean. Or C. Something Nolan signed. And subscribe if you haven't, because the next 10 minutes are the reason this story exists. Nia Brooks stepped forward from the side aisle, carrying the sealed manila envelope and a blue folder. She did not look dramatic. She looked prepared. She wore a dark jacket, narrow glasses, and the expression of a person who had already checked the copy count. The envelope in her hand was plain, the same kind Walt had trusted in his garage, but this one had his block letters across the front and a date written in the corner. The paper caught the fluorescent hanger light without shining. Dean said her name like a warning. Nia did not look at him first. She looked at June Patel, then Ada Strickland, then Ray Bell, then Marlene Price, one witness at a time. She stated that she represented the document escrow established by Walter Calder and that Wichita Technical Institute had been notified of a contested scholarship declination. Her voice was dispassionate enough that people leaned in rather than away. She explained that the scholarship office had received a decline in Iris Calder's name, but the duplicate notice held in escrow indicated Iris was the intended recipient and had not declined. Dean said this was not the place. Nia said the portal deadline was midnight and the named applicant was present. Laurel's hand went to her pearl earring. Nolan stared at the floor. Marlene Price looked like she might apologize to every chair in the hangar. Nia placed the envelope on a small table near the donor display. Ada Strickland moved closer without being asked. June Patel stepped to the left side of the table. Ray Bell came to stand behind me, not touching my shoulder, not making the moment sentimental. Drew remained 3 rows back, but he leaned forward with both hands on his knees. There were still 410 people in the room. The number mattered more the second time. Nia opened Walt's envelope in front of them. The metal clasp made a small scraping sound. Paper slid against paper. Inside were the duplicate scholarship notice, Walt's dated letter, a copy of the donor pipeline conditions, and instructions that any decline must be verified in person with Iris and a third-party witness. Dean's jaw worked once before sound came out. His right hand dropped from Nolan's shoulder. Laurel's fingers closed around her pearl earring so tightly the lobe reddened. Nolan looked down at the pin like it had become heavier. Nia read only the necessary portions. She did not perform Walt's letter. She treated it as evidence, which honored him more than a speech would have. The donor pipeline was created for the highest-scoring apprentice, the duplicate notice named Iris Calder. The acceptance instructions required verification before any decline could be treated as final. Ada Strickland closed her notebook. She said, quietly enough to make people lean in, that the donor language matched her office copy. Ray Bell removed his glasses and wiped them with the hem of his tie, though they were not dirty. Then, he said my documented shop hours and exam scores supported the scholarship award. He checked his watch before speaking. Even then, it was 6:26 p.m. June Patel took one step forward and confirmed the portal timestamp. The declination had been submitted from an IP address associated with the Calder household at 7:06 a.m. on April 15. Marlene Price pressed the clipboard to her chest and said Laurel had requested the seat change by phone. Not everyone gasped. Real rooms do not move together that neatly. A woman near the aisle whispered to the person beside her, then stopped when Ada looked up. 2 students in the 4th row turned toward Nolan. Someone near the back let out a breath that sounded like a word but was not one. The air conditioning pushed the banners overhead, blue and white, as if the rafters had begun counting too. Dean recovered first because men like Dean often confuse volume with control. He said this was a misunderstanding. He said I must have clicked something by mistake. He said scholarship portals were confusing and young people did everything on phones now. He made a half laugh and looked toward the donor table, as if someone there might rescue him from the shape of his own sentence. June Patel did not blink. She confirmed the declination was submitted from an IP address associated with the Calder household at a time when I was signed into a shop safety exam on campus. Ray Bell confirmed the exam record. He said I had entered the room at 6:58 a.m., completed the first module at 7:04, and was still at Station 3 when the declination was submitted at 7:06. Dean's face darkened. Laurel stepped in next. Her voice softened, which meant she wanted witnesses to mistake cruelty for concern. She said I had always been sensitive about Nolan's success. Ada Strickland looked at her notes. She said the scholarship was not transferable by family preference. Nolan lifted both hands slightly, not high enough to look guilty, not low enough to look innocent. He said he did not know the paperwork was wrong. His voice lacked the confidence his suit had promised. Nia opened the blue folder. She said the institute could not certify a scholarship transfer based on a disputed declination where the named applicant was verifiably elsewhere. The sentence landed with no ornament at all. Dean tapped 2 fingers against the donor table. Once, twice, then stopped because the sound had become evidence of him instead of authority. Laurel whispered that I was embarrassing the family. I looked at Nolan, not Dean. I know exactly how far this could go, and I know you did not file that form alone. Nolan's mouth opened, then closed. He thought I was threatening him. Dean thought I was threatening all of them. Laurel kept one hand near her earring and the other at her throat, looking around for sympathy that had not arrived on schedule. I asked for a table, a pen, and the registrar. There was movement then, not chaos. Correction. June Patel retrieved the registrar packet. Marlene Price cleared a folding table with 4 quick motions, moving programs, a box of pins, a stack of name cards, and a vase of carnations, whose damp paper left a ring on the plastic surface. Ada Strickland stepped back half a pace to give the documents room. Ray Bell stood where he could see the table and the aisle. Drew rose from the 3rd row but did not come closer until I looked at him. He brought me a pen. It was black, cheap, and reliable. The kind that does not photograph well but signs what needs signing. Nia laid out the corrected acceptance, the fraud affidavit, the duplicate notice, and the witness acknowledgement. The paper smelled like toner and new ink. The folding table wobbled at one corner, so Ray Bell put his foot against the leg without saying anything. Dean tried one more time. He said I was making a permanent family wound over a temporary administrative issue. Nia said the award file had already been altered, based on a false declination. Laurel said Nolan had built relationships with donors and could not be humiliated in public. Ada said donor relationships did not override named eligibility. Nolan said he had only done what Dad told him. The room went still around that sentence. It was not confession enough for a courtroom. It was enough for a hanger. Dean turned toward him so quickly his shoulder knocked the edge of the donor table. A stack of brochures slid 2 inches. Nolan adjusted his watch with a shaking hand. Laurel said his name once in a warning tone that had probably worked in kitchens and cars and church foyers for years. It did not work there. I signed the corrected acceptance first. My name looked steadier than my hand felt. I signed the affidavit second. June Patel witnessed it. Nia added her signature. Ada signed the donor acknowledgement. Ray Bell signed the exam verification. Marlene Price signed the seat change record and wrote Laurel Calder requested reassignment by phone. 4:37 p.m., May 22, in letters that slanted uphill. Dean, Laurel, and Nolan stood close enough to watch, but not close enough to interrupt. The microphone squealed again near the stage. Someone told graduates to begin lining up. The ceremony was supposed to start at 6:40. It was 6:37. Nia gathered the packet and told June she would file electronically before midnight, with hard copies to the institute and donor office. June nodded and said she would open the registrar terminal in the side office. Dean looked at me then as if seeing a machine he had used for years and never maintained. Laurel's eyes were wet, but I had seen her cry over parking tickets, chipped serving plates, and Nolan missing family photos. Tears did not tell me much. Nolan removed the scholarship pin from his lapel. He held it between two fingers. It had left a tiny, dark hole in the fabric. He did not hand it to me. Not yet. Truth does not need a louder chair. After the corrected acceptance was filed and the portal confirmed submission before midnight, the hangar was almost empty. It was 11:18 p.m. The folding chairs had been stacked in groups of 12. The floor smelled like crushed carnations, old coffee, and the sour metal scent that lingers after too many people leave a room at once. The ceremony had happened. My name had been called. I had walked across the stage without Nolan's pin, and without my parents clapping in any way I needed. Raybell shook my hand for exactly 3 seconds and said, "Good work." Ada Strickland nodded once from the donor row. Drew waited near the side doors with water because he had noticed I had not taken any. Dean and Laurel left before the last row stood. Nolan stayed. In a small institute office near the registrar desk, I sat with Nia, June Patel, Raybell, and Ada Strickland. The room had a clock that ticked too loudly, and a vending machine humming on the other side of the wall. Nolan waited in the hall, still wearing the suit but no longer wearing the pin. His lapel had the small puncture mark where the metal had been. Nia reviewed the remedies available to the institute. She did not make it sound dramatic. She listed them like maintenance findings: formal misconduct review, donor event exclusion, referral for scholarship fraud, review of Nolan's current standing where institute resources had been misrepresented. I listened. My hands rested flat on the table. The surface was cold. Then I said what I had already decided in the car between 6:11 and 6:16, before I ever stepped into the hangar. I could ask the institute to remove Nolan from his current program. I could let this follow every application he makes. Nia looked at me over her glasses. She waited. Raybell did not nod. Ada did not write. June's keys rested silent against her lanyard. I asked the institute not to expel Nolan from his unrelated program, provided he returned the scholarship pin, signed a statement correcting the record, and confirmed in writing that I did not decline the scholarship. I made it clear the mercy was for his future, not for Dean and Laurel's comfort. Nolan was called into the office. He looked at me as if the floor had shifted beneath him, and no one else had noticed. Confusion came first. It always does when a person has prepared for punishment and receives terms instead. He looked from me to Nia, then to Raybell, then back to me. Dean interrupted from the hallway before Nolan could speak. He said I did not get to make terms. Nia turned her head and told him I was the harmed applicant, and my recommendation mattered. Laurel started to cry. Not softly, not privately. It was the practiced sound of someone trying to move attention back to herself. I did not move toward her. Nolan removed the pin from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table in front of Nia. His fingers hovered over it for 1 second too long. The pin made a small sound when he released it. I did not touch it. End quote. I did not touch it. End quote. 4 days later, a folded statement arrived through Nia's office. It was not poetic. It was 1 page, 1, 2, point font, signed in blue ink. Nolan admitted he knew the scholarship was not meant for him after Dean told him not to ask questions until after graduation. I read it once at my kitchen table. The refrigerator hummed. Rain ticked against the window screen. My tea had gone bitter because I left the bag in too long. I did not call him. I texted Nia 5 words. Received. Keep it in the file. Then I put water on for a second cup of tea and sat while the kettle warmed. It took 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I counted without meaning to. The sound filled the kitchen more honestly than an apology would have. 2 weeks later, Nolan met me at a diner off Kellogg. The table was sticky near the salt shaker, and the booth vinyl had a split that scratched the back of my wrist when I sat down. He arrived 7 minutes early and still looked late to himself. He returned the pin in a small plastic evidence sleeve because Nia told him not to hand it to me loose. He said he was sorry without making it sound clean. That was better than I expected. He did not say he had been confused. He did not say Dean made him. He looked at the tabletop and admitted he liked how it felt when people assumed the best work in the room belonged to him. The coffee tasted burned. The spoon was bent. I said, "Sorry is a start. It is not a seat." Then I left first. 6 months later, Dean had lost his informal standing with the flight school donor circle. Men who used to ask him about Nolan's future started asking him about paperwork. He kept his job, but he stopped attending institute events. His 2-finger table tap disappeared in rooms where Nia Brooks was present. Laurel tried to explain the incident as a family misunderstanding for several weeks, but Marlene Price's seat change note and June Patel's timestamp made the story too hard to soften. Laurel still wore pearls, but she no longer sat on the parent hospitality committee. At public events, she smiled with her mouth first and her eyes later. Nolan remained in his unrelated program under academic monitoring. He completed an ethics module, submitted a correction letter, and stepped away from donor-facing student events for 1 year. He did not become close to me. That would have been too neat. But he stopped letting Dean speak for him in public, and once, outside a campus meeting, I saw him correct Laurel when she tried to say the scholarship mix-up had been mutual. Drew Harper graduated into a maintenance placement in Tulsa and sent me a photo of his first official shop badge. His chipped tooth showed in the reflection of the badge case. Ray Bell kept my corrected scholarship acceptance pinned inside his office cabinet, not on display, but where he could tap it once, before advising another quiet student. I entered the aviation pipeline that had been stolen from me. The scholarship, training placement, and donor-backed support totaled $1.08 in long-term value. I moved out of my parents' house permanently, stopped paying their bills, and rented a small apartment near the airfield where the windows rattled when planes passed overhead. The first night there, I slept 9 hours without hearing Laurel's voice through a wall. 10 months later, I received my first FAA certificate. I did not frame it immediately. I slid it into Grandpa Walt's stamped manila envelope, the same one that once held manuals, the same kind Dean laughed at, the same kind Nia opened under fluorescent hanger lights. The paper rasped softly against the certificate. The old machine oil smell was faint now, almost gone, replaced by clean wood from my workbench drawer, and the metal scent of tools kept dry. The envelope sat in the top drawer of my workbench beside a clean torque wrench and Walt's handwritten date, plain paper. Real work, proof that waited without begging to be believed. Earned seats don't stay stolen. If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe to By Then I Knew, and comment envelope if you have ever had proof waiting quietly while someone else took credit. And if you want to share your own story of a chair, a name, or a chance that someone tried to take, leave it below. I read more of them than you think.